No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. And today I'm bringing you guys an interview very outside our usual realm of expertise. So we have Lucia Bloom on the podcast. How you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice to have you out here. What brings you to LA? You're doing a little bit of the media rounds today, I take it?
Well, I live and work in LA.
Oh, okay.
So, but I am doing a lot of media interviews about the Sean Combs cases.
Right.
Because I represent a couple of the victims.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, this is kind of the main thing that I wanted to talk to you about is we've been just kind of having this conversation and seeing it steadily progress within hip hop in terms of, I think that there's been like a real change in tone where at first it felt like almost the mainstream hip hop opinion was like, oh, another one of our legendary great performers / executives kind of being railroaded and dragged unfairly, et cetera. And then as more and more information has come out and more victims have come out, it feels like people are beginning to take it more and more seriously. When did you actually get involved in this?
So first of all, I understand that reaction, that emotional reaction, because I've been representing victims of sexual assault for 38 years. And I've had people that I really admire end up being accused of things and convicted. And it is very disturbing. We want to believe that our icons, our heroes are wonderful people, or at least not villains.
Right.
And it's a whole process that we all have to go through, I think, mentally, to really hear the victims, to hear what they're saying, to understand why it takes so long for them to come forward, as in the case of Sean Combs. How I got involved is the way I always get involved as an attorney representing victims, is people reached out to me and said, can you help? And I vet the cases, which means my team and I do a very thorough investigation into the claims, into the person who's coming to me, into what evidence they have, what witnesses they have. We reject most of the cases that come to us because they don't meet our high standards. And some of them we do accept. And Dawn Rashard is one that I have accepted. Dawn Rashard is a very brave woman who worked with Sean Combs for many years on making the band back in 2004. The band Danity Kane, Diddy Dirty Money.
I interviewed Aubrey O'Day a while back.
Okay. Right. So, and she worked
soon after the Puff allegations started to come out, but before any formal charges or anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of Dawn. She's very brave. She's all about the music. This is the last thing she wanted to do. She didn't want to come forward and be accusing Sean Combs of sex trafficking and sexual assault and false imprisonment and everything that's in our complaint. But she was very inspired by Cassie Ventura's courage in filing that lawsuit about a year ago. And even though that was settled the very next day, it's all out there in black and white in her complaint. And then we saw that horrible video, which I'm sure you've seen, Adam, of Sean Combs beating Cassie Ventura in a hallway, kicking her when she was down on the ground, dragging her back to a party that she says she didn't want to be at. She's trying to leave.
Right.
So, I mean, that's horrific. If people are consensually at a party having a good time, have a great time. That's great. But nobody should be forced to be somewhere they don't want to be. People should be allowed to leave. People should not be drugged.
Yeah, I think for sure that video
assaulted.
was the moment where everybody was like, okay, there's no way that we're going to not be able to take this serious.
Right. Exactly. And sometimes it takes a video like that. And if you think about that video is in the public area of a hotel hallway. If that's what he does in a public area in a hallway, what is he doing behind closed doors?
Right.
And when you add that dozens and dozens of people have now come forward with stories, many of them with photos, with videos, with evidence, with emails, with texts, and of course, the U.S. government has chosen to criminally prosecute him after raiding 2 of his homes, getting the hard drives, getting his computers, getting his phones, which I'm sure had a lot of evidence, the famous 1,000 bottles of baby oil. I mean, there's a mountain of evidence and a lot of accusers here.
You said that there's a very high bar before you'd be willing to take somebody's case. Describe what that bar might be.
Well, I can't take a case against somebody like Sean Combs, who I know is going to have
massive
huge
resources,
lawyers, unlimited resources. This is what I do. I always go up against billionaire bullies. So I'm used to it, but it can't just be my client's word against the other person's word. There has to be evidence. We have the burden of proof. I do civil cases for money damages. But even so, we don't have the beyond a reasonable doubt standard that exists in the criminal realm, but we still have to prove our case by a preponderance of evidence. What that means is we have the burden of proof. So I have to have some kind of evidence. A lot of times people who are sexually abused don't go to the police. I don't really expect them to, especially against somebody like Sean Combs, who's so powerful. But I do expect that they told somebody at the time, that they have some evidence at least to put them at the place and time where they say they were. You say you were at, a freak off in New York in 2008. Show me something that you were at least in New York in 2008. Show me a calendar. Show me a phone ticket. Show me a credit card receipt, something. And the more, the better, obviously. The more outlandish the allegations, the more evidence we're going to need. Because, as you say, people initially hear something like this and they think, I don't want to believe it. It sounds crazy. I always admired this guy. So we really need evidence to prove our cases.
Right. Okay. And so there's no real statute of limitations when it comes to a civil suit?
No, there is.
Okay.
And that, for people who don't know, those are the time limits to file a case. And that's every predator's best friend, right? It's a get out of jail free card. If you can just run out the clock, you don't go to jail, or you don't have to pay a civil penalty. But thankfully, the state legislatures, especially in California and New York, have expanded the time in recent years because they understand that victims need more time. If somebody grabs your wallet and runs, you're probably going to call the police right away. But if somebody sexually assaults you, especially somebody you admire, you work with, you're probably not going to report it. And it's going to take time. And the law understands that. So what is the statute of limitations? There is additional time in both California and New York. In California, you have 10 years or 3 years from the time you connect in your mind the incident and the psychological injury. So what that means, I was just talking to a client yesterday about this. So what that means is a lot of people walk around knowing they were sexually assaulted, but they never really connected it to their sexual problems, to their depression, their anxiety, until many years later, perhaps when they're in therapy, or they're just older, more centered, more grounded, and they can really start putting the pieces together in their mind.
And so that's when the clock might start ticking, is the moment that you realize that you've incurred some trauma from this?
Yes, that you make that psychological connection. That's in California. And then in New York City, there's also an expanded statute of limitations, which is currently basically you can go back as far as you want to go for incidents that happened in New York City.
Interesting. Okay. And so I guess you probably can't say that much about it, but what is the essence of what Dawn is alleging that Diddy's involvement with her was? Because Audrey Day was kind of standoffish about letting out too much information. And even she claimed that she had received, calls from Diddy's lawyers offering her money to not come on this podcast the morning before she came on the podcast, which obviously wasn't able to authenticate that. But she seemed like she was very concerned about, and there was stuff we had to edit out because she was nervous about it coming out, et cetera.
Yeah. Dawn alleges that she was exploited in a number of ways. I mean, one way is that she simply wasn't paid for her work properly over the years, that she was really exploited in that way. But she also alleges sexual harassment, that she was sexually assaulted, that she witnessed a lot of violence. And that was part of the reason why she didn't come forward for so long, was because she was afraid. And again, we talked about the video that we saw of Cassie being beaten. So she alleges she saw a lot of incidents of Cassie being physically assaulted and others being physically assaulted. She says that she was personally threatened if she ever came forward, bad things would happen to her and the people she loved. She was locked in a car. That's the false imprisonment claim. She was locked in a hotel room, not allowed to leave. She was groped and grabbed and, threatened over and over again. During the time that she worked on making the band, literally he did not allow the women to eat for long periods of time because he wanted them to be skinny. It's just a horrendous series of workplace abuses up to and including sexual assault.